And start the recording.
Yeah.
Welcome to Wine Wanderings. Here with me today is Pietro Buttitta, winemaker, viticulturist, and owner of Prima Materia Winery. And I'm saying your winery wrong just to begin with. So welcome, Pietro, and you can correct me on this pronunciation.
Hi, Tricia. Thank you for having me. Prima Materia.
Materia. So I wanted to tell our readers a little bit about you first, just as an introduction. Pietro is a trained restaurant chef as well as a winemaker, and he founded Prima Materia Winery about a dozen years ago. And he began to make wine from his family's 12-acre vineyard, and it's near Lake County, California. And from this parcel of land near Clear Lake and in the shadow of Mount Konocti, it's definitely an Indian name, northeast of, they're all northeast of Napa Valley. He's making balanced Italian-American wines from small plots, each devoted to about a dozen varietals. His winemaking philosophy is mostly hands-off. However, sometimes he uses his feet to crush the grapes in the traditional Italian way. So I know that you actually sound like a one-person sorcerer, Pietro, and that you work your 12-acre vineyard divided in micro blocks, and you make sure you touch each vine 4 times before harvest. Well, that's definitely at least hands-on viticulture in my book. And I know your goal and your wine achievement has been meticulously balanced old world in the new world kind of style wines, which we would say in my book also is ridiculously affordable and very food friendly and giving you simple comfort with your food. So that's a great background to be a winemaker, an owner. So Pietro, in addition to making Italian California varietals in Lake County, what's been your biggest challenge and your biggest opportunity in growing and selling Italian varietals in the US?
Well, it's interesting because the market has changed so much in the last 10 years. I remember it wasn't that long ago that I would walk into a wine shop trying to sell Barbera or Sangiovese, and they would tell me to get out and ask why anybody would buy California Barbera. But that's changed so much in the last 10 years with a younger generation of wine drinkers coming in, new and novel varietals being something that are sought after rather than ignored. So I think there's been a tremendous, I'm just so excited to have people opening up, not only to Italian, but also even Portuguese grape varietals, Tempranillo, just all sorts of things that aren't necessarily in the standard French model, because the world of grapes is just too large to be sequestered in one little corner. As far as challenges, we are a very small operation, which is good and bad. It's largely good because it just allows us to change and adapt to things quickly. So we talk about hands-off winemaking, but that means using a lot of hands a lot of the time in other places and being very protective and careful with what we're doing, especially in the vineyard. So it's a lot of work, but it's also a real opportunity to pursue a vision and, adapt every year, run some winemaking experiments, change up some practices in the vineyard, some canopy management, see how the wine is resulting from that. So it's a lot of fine tuning with the small, hands-on, high input sort of style, just being in the vineyard and the winery constantly. So I love it. I can't imagine doing anything else. As much as I love cooking professionally in kitchens, I realize that being outside kind of takes the best part of that and then puts it into sunlight, which I prefer to fluorescent lights, unfortunately, all week long in kitchens.
Oh, yes, as we all do. So tell us how your wines differ from those grown and made in Italy.
Yeah, that's always an interesting question. One of my goals is to be as faithful as possible to Italian benchmark wines, but while at the same time, exploring our terroir, where we are located, what our climate is like, our soil, and how those two things come together in a way that is honest and transparent to both. Um, so our vineyard is at about 1,500-foot elevation, fairly warm summers. To put it briefly, it's warm climate California, and what I really love in the Italian wines is the earthiness, the minerality, the more savory tones that you don't always get in California. So it's a matter of just kind of working in the vineyard and working in the winery to bring those, longer fermentations, no new oak, being really careful to maintain acidity and brightness, but also, depth of flavor. A lot of our wines spend 2-3 years in barrel, but they're still very vibrant and fresh when they come out. And because they're varietal wines, I want to make sure that we're not eclipsing any of what makes Sangiovese, for example. So sometimes there's some whole cluster in there, which may or may not be the way it would be treated in its home area. But in our climate, it might be the way to get to a similar finished product. So, and that just takes experimentation every year and talking to people and just figuring out bit by bit how to get from point A to point B.
Well, great. Thanks for that explanation. Makes sense. I understand something you would love to do is to consult to Texas, here where I am,
Okay.
the Texas winemakers about using Italian varietals, and several of them do that now.
Yeah.
How do you see yourself doing that?
Yeah, I've actually had quite a few questions thrown my way about growing and winery practices as well with some of these things. From one winery wanted to know how we manage Negro Amaro in the vineyard and what we had found with sun exposure and how that affects the finished wines. I had another person ask about planting Aglianico. Ionico tends to not, sometimes there are grafting issues with it when you're planting rootstocks. And there were some other questions that came up. And even though the winemaking appeals to my former chef self, but I love being in vineyards probably first and foremost, because I just see it all as one continuous cycle. And anytime you go learn at somebody else's place and somebody else's vineyard, it makes your own winemaking better as well. And I'm just really inspired by what I see going on in Texas. It's, even though winemaking, grapes go back over 300 years out there, it's sort of a new adventure that's much more open-minded than a lot of areas of California.
They really are. I've written quite a bit about how they're adapting more Mediterranean area grapes to the heat of Texas, even though
Yeah.
they're grown in the Lubbock area mostly, which does have an elevation of about 3,000 feet. So that helps them cool off at night.
Yeah.
But yeah, people are experimenting with that. It's great. I'd love to see you out here.
Yeah.
So I'm hosting an Italian dinner with 3 of your wines in 2 weeks.
Nice.
And the 3 are the Friulano, the Negro Amaro, and the Ionico. So what would you recommend as pairings for those?
Yeah, pairings. It's always a wide world. I find it depends on the weather a little bit too. But so the Tokai Friulano that you have, that's actually, I call it a baby orange wine. So it has about 2 weeks on the skins and stems. So it's made just like a red wine. That was one I actually crushed by foot. So it has some tannin, but it's very full-bodied for a white wine. It almost drinks like a medium weight red. Poultry, pork. I can certainly handle creamy dishes. Friulano maintains acidity pretty well up to a point. So it has some nice savory tones and then some tropical fruit over it. But very, think of it like a white Rhone wine.
Okay,
Medium to full
that makes
bodied.
sense.
Yeah, cream, things like that. Just a really nice fresh aspect. The Negro Amaro, I'm really sort of becoming enchanted with. Um, this one only spent about 8 months in barrel, so it still has very fresh and vibrant fruit, a lot of plum and olive and cassis and black pepper. I tend to think of it as sort of like a Zinfandel a little bit, being medium weight, not too much tannin, nice ripeness. I actually have really enjoyed it with pizza, like hot oven, Neapolitan, nice
Um,
charred crust style. Works really well. Um, and then I certainly, even other things like eggplant parmesan could be wonderful with it. And charcuterie, it actually does interesting things with salty meats that really interact well, I've found. Then the Aglianico is getting more serious for us. That's sort of our big red, our version of Cabernet Sauvignon. So you're getting into more mineral there, more tannin, some higher toned acidity. So I like decanting it and then making it a main course sort of wine, especially with some roasted or braised items. I think it really works nicely.
okay, so that sounds great. Well,
Yeah, it's
Pietro,
surprisingly versatile.
we're really looking forward to the dinner. And thank you for joining me today on Wine Wanderings.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.